I was going to talk about Richard, my friend who died. How many years ago now? It must have been 2010ish, sometime like that. He'd fallen head over heels in love with this girl who was, she was just a real, she just used him, and he just couldn't. He became obsessed with her. They came round and her and her boyfriend and beat him up, and Matt Burton put his cock in his mouth and really humiliated him and battered him properly with these weights. But what I was going to talk about him really was the change in him, because I had another friend called Turps, and I used to see him, Paul Turpin. He used to walk across our playing fields after school, and he had long hair. He looked Afghan coat. He looked like and he's older than us. There's someone to look up to. And I ended up living with him in a house full of us. We all ended up, at that time, you could go straight onto the dole at 16, because it was during the recession, 1982ish, sometime like that. And I ended up moving in with him. And he changed. He became an alcoholic. Alcohol just changed him into, it like flipped his head. I don't know why. And he became like really abusive and really rude to people. And the last time I had a chat with him, I was sat under a tree on Woodhouse Moor, and he goes, he turns up and goes, Skree under a tree. That's appropriate, because we're both boys of the woods, We both were, when we were younger, we were always out in the trees and the woods, and there's still a tree that's not been cut down in what's left of Frimley Park Woods. And if you look up really high up the trunk, he climbed up and put PT 78, I think it was, and that's still there. I went to have a look at it ago. I'll take a photograph of it sometime. But he I don't know how it changed him, the alcohol somehow, and he ended up living in Amsterdam with a load of them over there. Eventually, he was deported back to England, and he lived for about another 4 weeks. And he stayed with his parents for about a week, and then they'd have enough of him. Apparently, he said to his dad, looking at himself in the full-length mirror, and he could see the state of himself. And he goes, Dad, I finally decided what I want to be, a male model. Anyway, he became, for the last few weeks of his life, became a face on the city centre streets of Leeds, begging and just hanging around the homeless and everything, which he was homeless, And he ended up going back to St George's Crypts. Now, St George's Crypts has always been a place in Leeds where the homeless people go to get their heads down, and if you're soon enough, you can get a place. Anyway, he got a place in St George's Crypt, and he injected some heroin and overdosed on it and died. He was about 38. We went to his funeral. I went with Richard. We went up to Moortown, and there was the whole Catholic community had come out, real good church community that supported his dad and his mum and family and everything. And it was really sad how he went. I mean, I never bore the brunt of him when he was wild, but I remember him coming round and he had a fight with his girlfriend Sue in the kitchen. They were throwing pans at each other, and he ended up falling asleep. I had an open fire then, because there was loads of, at that time, they were knocking down all the terraced houses up in Woodhouse, and I'd go up there and get the banisters, cut them into lengths, get telegraph poles, cut them into lengths, get any wood you can get, really. There's just tons of it. I mean, the people came in first and took all the fireplaces and went out to London and sold them. But what was left was there's loads of timber, and I was going up there and getting a load every day, carrying it back to our flat, which is on Broodale Road, where I lived with Dean and my girlfriend at the time, Sybil. And he fell asleep by the fire with his head really close to the fire. I had to move him so to burn his brains and fry his brains. But yeah, the last that happened was after they got deported from Amsterdam. He was on the streets of Leeds, city centre, a face amongst the homeless community there. But it was really sad when he died, because he showed a lot of promise when he was young. He was really clever. He could mimic people and take the piss out of people really well. he has a real talent for being rude. But yeah, sad when he died. I think he was about 38. Anyway, I went to the funeral of Richard, but it wasn't long after that, only a few years before I was going to Richard's funeral. How Richard had become obsessed with this girl. He got sent to prison. He only was caught with 1/8 of heroin. He was selling heroin. But the SDS guys came in and said, "Oh, Richard's asked me to work for him for a couple of days, you know, what do you want?" Foolishly, these people said, "Okay, I want whatever." And they asked him, "How long have you been scoring off Richard for?" And they said, "Oh, a couple of years." So he only had 1/8, but he ended up getting 3 years for selling heroin, which was really unfair. Anyway, he became obsessed with this girl, and he ended it after they beaten him up and everything and stuff. He started injecting heroin in real large doses, and didn't really care for life anymore. I spent like a 10-month period when my dad fell over and banged his head, and I had to move. I had to give up my business furniture for a while. And I moved to Leeds, and I was staying at Richard's because he could look after my dog. So I had a big Siberian Husky cross with a German Shepherd dog, powerful beast, my dog. And but at least I could stay there with my dog. But of course he was selling heroin, and crackheads were coming around, and they'd be up all night smoking crack, and I'd be trying to get some sleep. And I'd struggle to get some sleep. I'd come off heroin by this point, but I'd sort of discovered crack and got a habit on that, which was probably worse. And I'd be working away, doing these various projects. We did the Deep in Hull, which is like a big aquarium type place. Stayed over there, and they put us up in hotels to stay there. But I remember going out to try score, and I got robbed. These two lads took me back to this block of flats area and went inside and came out with this big wrapper, and I thought, that's too big, you know. But I knew I was getting ripped off, but if I protested, I was going to get beaten up. I was in a dodgy area of Hull, I didn't know. Anyway, I thought, fuck this, I'm going to drive back to Leeds. And I went back to Leeds, and I got some crap there. Yeah, what else happened? We did one up at Newcastle, the Centre for Life. We were working up there, I got really bad flu. And on the last day of the job, the boss of the company, Jim, turned up, and we all hit it really hard working to get this job finished, get all the little snagging list and stuff done. We'd done like a rolling staircase not a staircase, but a ramp for the wheelchair people, and all these various installations and cabinets and boxes and stuff for the place. Yeah, we were struck down with a really bad flu. But on the last day, when all them came, someone had scored some E's, and then we ended up going out in Newcastle. And I remember going into this one place, and this girl just fell off the balcony, about 30 feet or something, bang. And obviously it was sort of chaos, so we left there, went to this other place, and we went in there, and there's like a buckaroo type thing, and Jim was on that, and we were all off our heads, Sonny, and in this nightclub, they all started dancing on the tables and stuff. It was mental. And we ended up in this cafe that was like it was the gay quarter of Newcastle. And I remember talking to one of the Newcastle blokes about it, and he goes, "Yeah, they come up from London," as if there's no gay people in Newcastle. But anyway, there was a little cafe there, and this cafe sold, what's it called? Various little sort of. It was at a time when you could get like proper psychoactive drugs in shops and stuff. And anyway, they were getting balloons of nitrous oxide. Yeah, I'm just recording, so I'll be with you in a minute. Yeah, and so I ended up in there doing that until about 4 a.m. Went back to the hotel, and we had to be there at 8. I was the only one who actually got there for 8 of the ones who'd gone out and done E's. And we were all still pretty high in the morning, but we got through that morning. It was a fucking drag. Really exhausted we were, really hungover, and coming down off the E's. And I got to Leeds, and I went to stay at Richard's for a bit again, and did loads of gear to come off that, succumb to the brown again for a bit. But yeah, he got obsessed with this girl called Sahela, and she was really charming. She was very beautiful, could sing. She's a real, temptress, she wasn't for him. She just wanted to get his drugs and steal off him, which she did various times, and robbed him with this other bloke who's Matt Burton, who was a real boyfriend. But anyway, yeah, he was getting worse and worse. His dad phoned me up and said, "Can you talk to him, Skree? Can you get him to see sense?" And I tried, but as soon as they started talking that way, he'd hang up on me, so I couldn't sway him. But that prison sentence was 3 years. I think he served 18 months. But that changed him somehow. He just became very, like, his flat used to be meticulously tidy. Everything was piled up, comics in the right place, books and stuff. But after that, it was just a complete turf. When I went there, I had to clean the bath out, clean everything. Bath hadn't been used for months and stuff. And the kitchen was full of oil, food and everything. So I cleaned all that out, hit it really hard. And so I'm not living here without any of that. And I'd stay there and go to work, and I'd come home, and Richard had have a shot ready for me. And I don't do it anymore, but the shots were about 15 quid, and you get about 5 pipes out of them. And it was all crack. It was always crack then, rather than white powder, which now they all do. They all get just by the powder and wash it up themselves. Anyway, Richard died. Went up to his funeral, carved a block for him that said "Remember Richard," and I put it up there. It's in the Green Burial site. If you're ever in the cemetery up at Lawnswood in Leeds, the block should still be there. I'll go photograph it again one day. But he was in the Green Burial site, and it was only a year later that his dad died, and his dad was put in there next to him. So me and his dad are under the soil there together. But anyway, down here this week there's been 2 deaths. There's a guy called Rick who was a bit of a peripheral character. But he was always around, for 20 years or so. Never knew him that well. But the main one was a guy we used to call Woofy, and he'd been doing hard drugs for years, and he was like, when I first met him, he was like a sort of poacher, farmer type character in wellies and stuff. He had his 2 dogs with him, and he was into going out lamping, shooting rabbits and fishing. He was really into fishing. He knew all the rivers and everything in the water. We were looking at the maps all over and where all the water was and stuff. And my dad was like that. My dad used to read the country by the rivers, maps it out in his head by the rivers, rather when most people map it out by motorways and major A roads. His thinking was all in terms of the rivers, which I always thought was a really good way of looking at the country. But Woofy died. Woofy was like a pillar of the community, though. He was kind of very well known, but he'd been doing drugs for years, banging up 16ths of gear and a gram of speed thrown into his groin for sort of like 20 years. He got sepsis anyway and died. This was the other day. It was really sad to hear it, but not that surprised. Although I'd seen him a few days before, I've been regularly seeing him, and it's been a dark week, really, very sad. So yeah, I was going to do, I'll do more about Richard one day, because Richard was my best mate really at the time, or for a few years around that time he was. And it was the place that I always went to stay when I could turn up at any time, in any condition, and I'd be welcomed in, and he always looked after me. And he was a really good friend. We were really close, and I'll talk about him more. He deserves a video of his own. But yeah, this was really just to say, Woofy, rest in peace, and Rick, rest in peace. And I'll do more. I'll go through the deaths eventually, but the major ones, I've done Martin, but I'll do Richard, another one for Richard sometime, and maybe I'll do a longer one for Turps sometime. Yeah, that's the end of Woofy.